Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Fitz from the STEM Connection with another STEM Quick Win STEM professional interview today. And joining us today, we have Stephanie Shook, who is a restoration ecologist. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah. So, restoration ecologist, why don't we just start there? Can you explain a little bit what that is and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So what a restoration ecologist does is essentially they restore the natural environment. So it could be an area that has been degraded in some way, natural areas. So that could be a forest or a prairie, any kind of natural habitat. If you're talking about Indiana, we have all those habitats, wetland habitats. I've got the Eco Lab behind me, so this is where I work and the area that I restore. So we have about 75 acres of restored forest and wetland and prairie. We also have a creek that runs through, so we've got some riparian areas. So, and all of that, it's in the middle of Indianapolis, so it's all been degraded in some way. You know, it was actually the pond behind me was a pasture, and there were cattle on it over 100 years ago. So, so a lot of these areas may have been farmed, maybe they were cut for some other reason, maybe there were buildings on it in one time and now there aren't. And so we remove invasive species and then we plant and install native species to those habitats to restore the function of that. So you want to have a lot of diversity with wetlands and forests, so lots of different types of plants so you can support lots of different types of wildlife.
What would your day look like? How would you spend your time at work?
I love that question because I don't feel like I have a typical day ever. I will say though, I have a typical day like in the spring and a typical day in the summer and a typical day in the fall. So because we have different things that we need to accomplish depending on the season. So like we're in spring right now. So typically I would be out there and we would be we also do field trips and a lot of public programming. So I do a lot of environmental education. So we might have school groups out to teach about restoration. We do a lot of talking about restoration. Then we have a lot of students that help us do the restoration. So they might help us install native plants or maybe plant trees. So I also work with a lot of the undergraduates at Marian University. So I have a lot of interns that work with me and they learn things like plant identification. They learn different types of restoration techniques. So how to remove certain invasive species and then what to do after that. And then other things like maintenance, right? So we have 75 acres. So we have to clear the trails, make sure they are clear for people so they can walk through, because as you could probably imagine, you know, midsummer, the Eco Lab starts taking over the trail. So if you don't clear that pathway, then it'll take it over. So we remove a lot of things from the trails, and that might be trees that have fallen down too, and really any other type of maintenance that we need done.
Yeah, great. So a lot of time outdoors.
A lot of time outdoors, yeah. We can spend time outdoors all year long, but it just kind of depends. We don't usually spend a lot of time outdoors in the winter time. It just kind of depends on the weather, and really it depends on the weather regardless of whether it's spring, summer, fall. So it's every day is somewhat different, but then we have those typical tasks that we have to do.
Yeah, I kind of like this question. What's your favorite thing about your job?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. Favorite thing about my job would probably be that that it's always changing. So I get bored easily. And I really like, I mean, I'm not much of a winter person. When it's cold, I'm a little wimpy, but I like having the seasons because it helps, you know, kind of break up the year. And you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes I go in thinking I'm going to be doing one thing, and then I realize that the beavers, we have a colony of beaver on the pond. They might plug up something and flood one of the trails. So then I might have to undo some of their handiwork, which it's okay. I love the beavers. But that's the funny thing is I'll go in thinking I'm going to do one thing and go, oh, well, the beavers flooded this trail, so I guess we have to work on that. So I like that, and then I'm always learning. So I mean, there's always something for me to learn about or to uh, teach others as well. So it's always learning, always doing.
Yeah, great. And then can you also share with us a little bit about your STEM journey, kind of how you got, like when did you kind of know you were interested in ecology, or kind of what was your path like to kind of get where you are?
So I wasn't always a restoration ecologist. I didn't always know what restoration ecology was. So I've done a lot of really cool things that got me to where I am. And I'll try to keep it short. So my undergraduate degree was in anthropology, and because I was focusing on primatology. I wanted to be Jane Goodall. So if any of you know who Jane Goodall is, she's one of my heroes. And so I knew I wanted to do field work in some way. I wanted to work outside. I wanted it to be involve wildlife or something like that. And I thought that's where it was. And so I tried that. And that was not the field work for me.
Yeah.
It takes a certain type of person, and you have to have a lot of patience, and it's a lot of the same thing over and over again. You go out and you watch primates for 8 hours a day, and you write down for every 30 seconds what they're doing, and mostly it's sleeping. So and of course it's more exciting than that in different ways, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I joined the Peace Corps, and that's where I started really with my environmental education. So I did a lot of environmental education with the school in my village. I also worked with women in development. So we gave scholarships to young girls and did take our daughters to work conferences. So that was a really great experience. And when I came back, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I knew I wanted to work with animals. I always did. So I did a lot of things. I pretty much did everything in Indianapolis that had to do with animals. So I worked for the Humane Society, and that's where I started learning training methods and behavior. And then I also started working at the zoo. So I worked at the zoo, Indianapolis Zoo, as a zookeeper for several years, and loved it. But there was something missing. I really knew that there was this field work that I wanted to go out and do. And so I went back to school, and I got my graduate degree in natural resources and environmental management at Ball State. And that was where I learned that I loved identifying things. So I didn't really know what all those plants were. And now I do. I mean, not all of them, but that's where I learned that, ooh, what's that plant? And what does it do? And can I eat it? And what's that plant called? And who eats that? And who needs that plant? And same thing with the trees. I started being able to learn the different types of trees based off of their bark and their leaves and things like that. So, and that's where I learned about invasive species, and then learned about all the native species we have and the different types of habitats. And so it just kind of, that was where it really became real for me. And I learned that it was something that I could do.
Yeah, that's great. So in Indiana, we have our employability skills standards. So those that might not know what those are. And so I had shared those with you, Stephanie, and I know that you've seen those before. So can you identify maybe one or two that are important to be successful at your job?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mentioned that every day can kind of be different, and you have to kind of roll with the punches. So adaptability is one thing that you just have to have, especially if you're working in any discipline outside. You have to be able to deal with the weather, or if you're working with volunteer groups and things like that, things change, or you thought you were going to have 30 people and you only have 5, or you thought it was going to be a beautiful day and then here comes a thunderstorm. So it just, it's never ending on what can happen that you didn't expect necessarily. So being adaptable, I say, would be one really big thing. And then the other thing is perseverance. Anybody that works in an environmental field, you have to have perseverance, because everybody's passionate about it, right? I don't do this for the money. I do this because I love it. and I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about learning about wildlife and teaching others about it. And sometimes not everybody is as passionate about it as I am, or we don't always have as much money as we want to be able to do the things we want. So you have to really be able to persevere and kind of get through those things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then another question that we like to ask our STEM professionals that we interview are, do you have any examples of tools or technology that you use and can share with us?
Yes, so I do have a few things here. So field guides. So I love the golden guides. So I'll show you a few golden guides. I have like a big stack here. I love the golden guides because they're cheap. So I got this one for like $2 at Half Price Books. And there are so many of them, and they're great for lots of different ages, and they're not very big, right? They're pretty little, so you can throw them in your backpack and go out. So these are one of my favorites, really any field guides. These are good to start out with, the golden guides, but then also I've got lots of field guides. So what I suggest is, if you can, so this is 101 Trees of Indiana. So if you can, get as local as possible, because that's going to help you to identify things. So like if I have a Butterflies of Indiana guide as well, if I had a Butterflies of North America guide, and I was in my backyard in Indiana, it might be a little harder for me to get to that species or even that genus. So having something that is more geared towards what I would possibly see in my backyard is really great. But yeah, field guides are awesome. There are apps now for lots of different types of ways to identify different animals and plants. So there are a lot more things that are available than books, but the books are always the first thing I go to.
Do you have a suggestion or idea of what kids or families could do kind of in their own backyard or in their neighborhood to kind of work on the skills of an ecologist, or kind of do something in your realm?
Yeah, so go out and observe. Take one of these books with you. If you really want to, take a day to learn about spiders, or take a day to learn about wildflowers. And it doesn't mean you have to go to this pristine park that everybody goes to. You don't have to go to Turkey Run. You can go outside your back door and look at different types of plants and compare them. Why does this one, what are the leaf shapes of this one versus the leaf shapes of this one? And what's the flower structure versus this flower structure? And you can look at different trees and compare the bark of this tree versus the bark of that tree. You can watch an ant and see what they're doing. So, and you don't have to, even if you don't have a backyard, you can still do this if you look out your window, if you sit on your porch. There are trees everywhere. If you don't have trees, you probably have tiny little bugs, like I said, ants or worms or roly-polies or anything. Watch them. What are they doing? Who are they interacting with? What do they look like versus other things that you're seeing? Are they making any noises? Just different things like that. So that's what ecology is, right? So biology is a study of all living things. Ecology is studying the relationship between those things and their environment. And that's really important. Those things are really important to learn and to think about when you are restoring an area, or if you just want to learn more about ants or spiders or trees. You have to know who relies on that tree, how they're using that tree, and who does that tree rely on.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially this time of year, that's perfect because there are so many changes that are happening that when you look out that window or go see what's in your backyard one day, a day or two later, you could see some completely different things with what's blooming and growing and the birds and the butterflies that are coming back and all that. So even just kind of thinking about from one day or 1 week to the next, how things change, what they might look like.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to go to a pristine area to do that. You can see this happening in your backyard. I went out to my backyard the other day and I watched an ant getting nectar from little spring beauty flowers. And he would go from one flower to the next, to the next, to the next. And I just thought, well, okay. I didn't know he did that. So now I know that there are ants that also benefit from the spring beauty flowers.
Those are great things to go out and kind of see the beauty of our earth and think about what we can do to keep it that way, kind of healthy and beautiful for all the creatures that live here. So Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.